Hey guys, welcome back again from Tampa Bay. I am here at Cotee River Cycles. We're starting off our cool, very evolving series here. And Ben, one of the owners here, is going to be working on this 2003 Indian Scout. He's going to tell us a little bit about what it came in for, what it's doing, and then what we're going to do next. We're also going to have a bunch of other stuff. This one is going to be kind of an ongoing repair. So we're going to try and get this guy settled in.
Hello YouTube, this is Ben from Cotee River Cycles. I'm the owner here, and what we have here today is a 2003 Indian Scout with a charging system issue. Kind of a strange issue. We've already tested the stator and regulator. We know that the stator is bad. However, this stator was recently replaced, and it was replaced here, so I know the work was done right. So we're going to tear into it a little bit, take a look, and see if maybe we've got an issue with the rotor or possibly the wrong stator amperage.
What'd the guy bring it in for?
Originally came in just for a charging system issue, and it was not charging, so we tested it initially, saw that the regulator was good, that the stator wasn't getting AC current, and so we replaced the stator. Now we're still not getting AC current after reassembly, so we are going to dig into it again and see if possibly rotor is bad or if the stator is the wrong amperage.
All right, let's get going.
All right. So step one in any motorcycle repair obviously is to always disconnect the battery. So we're going to remove the positive terminal now before we start any other work. So the next thing we got to do is remove the primary fluid, and in this case with this 2003 Indian Scout, it is a 3/4 inch drain plug. Alright, so we've drained the primary fluid, and now we're going to remove the outer primary cover. In this case it's a 3/16 hex head Allen bolt. So we'll just kind of break all the bolts loose and kind of walk around the whole cover. Now there's going to be some residual primary fluid that's probably going to come out. You can't always drain it all. It's not a super big deal. Just a little bit of a mess. Alright guys, so we've removed most of the bolts out of the primary. I always leave a couple bolts right in the top of the primary just in case the primary gets hung up on the inner primary. And what happens sometimes, you got to take a rubber mallet and just kind of softly tap around it to loosen it up. In this case, this primary is already nice and loose. So we'll go ahead and remove these last two bolts out of here and go ahead and pull the outer primary cover off. So we've removed the outer primary cover, and now we're going to go ahead and take all the guts out of here. The clutch, compensating sprocket, and primary chain to pull all this out so we can actually access the rotor and stator. So what we're going to do here is we do have one specialty tool for this project. It's GEM's part number 2234. You can use a small piece of wood or something. Basically all this does is simply locks in between the chain and compensating sprocket, or the chain and clutch sprocket in the rear here. And it's just to lock it in place so you've got good tension to pull apart your clutch, and then of course this compensating nut up here, which obviously can be very difficult. So we're just going to start out back here with taking some clutch bolts out. This clutch is a little bit different style than a standard Harley clutch. It's more like a Barnett style clutch on this Indian. So what I like to do with these is just kind of walk around and loosen up the 6 outside clutch bolts in the basket. There are springs behind this, however it's not a diaphragm style clutch like on an Evolution.
And what size socket are we having there?
This size socket is a 10 millimeter. I did say that correctly. I know it's a metric bolt in this, and it should be standard, but they like to change it up on us.
Now, you were saying to me earlier that this is kind of like a catalog parts collection kind of bike?
Sort of, yeah. The Indian, this year range, I believe it was like 2000 to 2003, or maybe 99 to 2003. Kind of a weird time for Indian. They were owned by a smaller company, and they didn't do a lot of their own in-house manufacturing. They pretty much sourced everything out of a catalog. You know, everything's kind of a bolt-together kit. So technically, if you wanted yourself an Indian Scout, you could just about assemble one out of a book.
The Sears catalog bike.
There you go. Kind of a cool concept. I mean, customers were able to do basically whatever they wanted to do to their bikes and get it in a name brand, American-made form.
So it's pretty much like a Harley someone's owned for a couple years.
Basically, yeah, and already tweaked it out for you.
Yeah.
Right, so just pulling out the clutch disc, got the springs and screws removed. So there is the clutch pack.
Nice.
And we're just going to set this off to the side. And then we'll be pulling this nut out right here. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and remove the clutch basket nut and then the compensating sprocket nut. Very first thing we did was put this bike into a higher range gear, which you can do on a lift or on the ground. Just bring the back wheel up off the bike and simply roll it and put it into gear. Once we've done that, we'll move back here and go ahead and pull this nut off. Now, the thing to remember with this nut is it's left-hand thread. So if you put it in to go tighten or theoretically loosen, you're actually tightening the nut. So you want to make sure that you're lefty-tighty, righty-loosey. I know that sounds kind of weird, but that's the way it is.
And what size socket?
It's a 30 millimeter nut in this case. So we broke it loose, and now we will go ahead and pull it out. I usually leave just a few threads in just so it kind of stays there just in case when we pull this compensating nut off, the whole mechanism doesn't slide out. Shouldn't be an issue, it's never happened, but there again, safety. So the next thing we're going to do is get this compensating nut off. Alright guys, so we're going to go ahead and loosen up this front compensating sprocket. This is where that specialty tool that we talked about earlier, that Jim's part number 2234, comes in handy. Basically the best thing you can do is just kind of wedge it in between the actual sprocket and the chain. Now this one is a standard thread, so you go back to your standard way of loosening things. This front compensating sprocket is 1.5 inches, and this one you're really going to have to step up on to get to loosen. If you can't break it with the regular wrench, which a lot of times you can, especially if they haven't been removed, they're still OEM. A lot of times what you'll have to do is either find a piece of pipe, or I use a jack handle oftentimes to really get the leverage that I need to be able to break this loose.
Or if you guys have seen my other projects, I've got the really cool ratchet with the extension handle.
Yes.
Works really well.
Yeah, those are really cool. The other thing too is by no means you ever want to use an impact on this. These twin can motors, they come in two forms, balanced or non-balanced, depending on the model. In this particular case, it's a soft tail frame, which means it's got the balance motor in it. With the balance motor, if you were to use an impact on this, and for some reason you messed up the bearings or anything like that in the crank, this balanced crank will become unbalanced, which could damage the motor. So you never want to use an impact on this compensating sprocket. So we'll go ahead and get this pulled off, get it all loosened up, and then we'll be ready to pull this assembly out. So the last thing we got to do is just pull this tensioner off we've already got our compensating sprocket nut and our clutch basket nut removed. So we're going to pull this tensioner off, and then we'll be able to hopefully slide this whole assembly out.
What size wrench is that?
This is a 9/16.
You got 2 bolts under that. Are they the same size?
They are actually a different size, but what we're going to do here is pull the tensioner off as a whole assembly. So all we have to do is actually remove this top nut off this bolt. The bolt will remain in the case, and then we'll pull the compensating sprocket off. Now, when it comes time for reassembly, assuming that the primary chain tension was already good, which in this case it was, there was no issues there, it's a good chain, it's not stretched. You want to take close attention to the markings right here in your tensioner. You'll see an oil residue line that kind of marks where your tensioner was. So if you do use any kind of carb cleaner, brake cleaner, anything to clean all this out, you either want to mark that again or just pay close note to it. And all that does is just help you with the reassembly time. It'll go a little bit quicker because you won't have to play guessing games or reset the tension on the chain. So, should be good to go. And it should be good to go. Pull our tool away here. Now, in theory, this whole assembly should just slide forward, like alright. So we've removed the clutch basket, compensating sprocket. That was just the compensating washer that sits between the rotor and sprocket. And then we left our chain tensioner intact for reassembly. That way it's a little bit quicker. So from here we're going to have to start working on removing the inner primary. First thing I like to do is pull the starter bolts out, which is on the other side of the bike, and then we'll come inside here and start removing our lock tabs that are there for security to keep your bolts in place, and then we'll go ahead and pull this primary cover off. The starter bolts sometimes are a little hard to get to, but all you got to do is just look towards the back of the primary, and you'll see one towards the back and then one towards the front. There'll always be a hex style bolt. They will be different sizes, so definitely pay attention to that. In this case, they're both 6mm. And what I like to do sometimes is, especially for stuff like this, I'll grab my socket, and then I use a wobble to help me get into place sometimes, and then a rather long extension to get back in there. So we'll go ahead and assemble all this, and then fish it around and get these starter bolts pulled out.
So, quick update here. We needed to get the starter out because the 2 bolts, one that was here and one down there, run into the primary, so you need to take those out to get the primary off. These bolts were oxidized and stripping. In order to get to them, because it had this special oil tank on here, it restricted access to getting a straight shot of this top one. It all had to come out along with its brackets, barely enough room. We don't think the stock one would have this kind of issue, but this particular one did. So now we can get that cover off.
Alright, now that we've got the starter finally unbolted from the back side, all we're going to do is just knock these locking tabs, these safety tabs, off these inside primary bolts, and then we'll unbolt all of that and we'll be ready to pull the primary off. Slides out like so. Oh shit, we're supposed to be shooting.
I am.
Oh. Well, ignore that last comment. And here comes the air primary. Parts are falling out everywhere!
That's like giving your buddy a drink and asking him what time it is.
Alright. Alright, so we've got the inner primary off. Now all that's left is the rotor, and we can get to the stator. Now, there is a specialty tool for this to make it a little easier, but if you take a rag and just pull it out, it'll pull out. The reason why it's so difficult is the magnets inside, these pickup magnets,
Oh yeah.
will just grab a hold of that. So you got a little magnetization there. So, now we can take a look at our stator and determine what the issue is.
What was found on this bike was some suspect and mismatched parts. So the customer opted to go for a complete kit, giving a new matched stator, magneto, and regulator rectifier. So we're going to take everything apart. We got the stator coming off here, and then it's simply turning a few bolts, unplugging things, and putting in the brand new parts that are guaranteed to work together. So what you got there is a little tiny set screw, and that's going to allow you to take the stator wiring harness out. So assembly is pretty much everything in reverse. Got the stator back on, reassembling the assemblies on the primary. Next up is swapping the regulator rectifier. We've got a wiring clip down there. Might have some zip ties to undo. And we've got two nuts holding it on. On with the new one. That looks better. And this is just fishing the new wire through, new zip ties, getting everything buttoned up. Now we just run all the bolts back in. Torque spec on these are 15 to 19 foot-pounds. And here's a tip if you're trying to torque back on any of your rotating engine parts and the rear wheel wants to spin, have a buddy hold down the rear brake. Bada bing, bada boom. Always remember to check your service manual for the correct torque specs. If you have aftermarket equipment, consult their specific instructions. When you're doing anything pretty much involving the engine, pay attention to when they specify crisscross patterns to prevent warping. Fresh oil. So there we go, success. It works. Everything is charging correctly. Don't mind the smoke, that's just oil residue burning off. Thank you very much to the guys at Cotee River Cycles. If you're ever in the Tampa area bay and you need service work, definitely check them out. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to subscribe. Give me a thumbs up. We'll see you next time.